What's going on, my good people? My name is Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel. Now, the ever-ongoing debate is whether video games can be considered fine art or not. This is something that's constantly debated throughout the years, and nobody ever really comes to a consensus on it. I myself consider games to be art. I think that they could express themselves as an artistic medium, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys who are watching this video right now would agree with me. But every once in a while, we get a game that gets released that reignites this debate and causes people to question whether games can be considered art, or should they actually try to be considered art? Which is exactly the case with the game that we're going to talk about today. But is it really good, or does it absolutely completely suck? Well, let's find out together by diving into this review. This is The Quiet Man. The Quiet Man is a story-driven action game from Square Enix. Unlike what we normally see from the publisher that gives us so many Final Fantasy-like titles, The Quiet Man is a game that takes place in the real-world New York City. The story follows a deaf character named Dane, a bodyguard of sorts who works for a criminal group that runs a club in the city. One night, a beautiful songstress is kidnapped in the club by a man wearing a mask, and all hell breaks loose. We see everything through Dane's perspective, so things are loosely presented in cutscenes, and you'll have to piece things together as you go along. The biggest characteristic of The Quiet Man is that the game is presented with very little sound and almost no subtitles, at least for the first playthrough, but we'll get to that later. It's an attempt at making a game feel a little bit more like an artistic film rather than an action game. Whether that's something appealing is totally up to you, however. The game is pretty short, with me finishing everything in about 2.5 hours, so it takes about the same amount of time that it would take to watch a full-length feature film. But is it worth that amount of time? I honestly don't really think so. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there want me to get into some specific stuff, but we're going to do this one step at a time because there's a lot to unpack with The Quiet Man. When I first saw this game, I thought that it was going to be something more akin to something like The Bouncer, which is an old Squaresoft game from the PlayStation 2 era. But what I ended up getting was a game that not only I felt like a little bit lied to, but was just trying to do all these different things with its story, trying to be so artistically, cinematic and all these other types of things, that it almost felt like it forgot how to be an actual video game. The story itself is very confusing when you play it the first time around. Again, there's no sound and there's no real kind of sense of dialogue and even subtitles, except for the very beginning of the game. You're playing as a character called Dane, and he's deaf, and you're trying to experience the world through his eyes and through his perspective, not only in just the fighting, but also with some of the dialogue and some of the other cinematic sequences that happen throughout the different parts of the game. Personally, for me, I really hated not having any dialogue. I understand what the game was trying to do, quote unquote, but personally for me, I just felt like it just didn't come through in the way that it was intended. For someone like me and a lot of other people out there, we're not opposed to experiencing a game from a perspective that's completely different from our own, whether it's someone that experiences a handicap or someone that has some sort of mental illness or anything of the sort. Hellblade is a perfect example of this. But with The Quiet Man trying to actually show us the world through a deaf person's perspective, I felt like a lot of the stuff got missed in translation and completely just went off the rails. Even though I felt like it was trying to do something noble, it didn't really hit its mark. When you play the game the first time around, the story is very confusing and very open-ended and loose. A lot of the different events that you see, some of the action sequences and the characters that you kind of see pop up here and there, it kind of really opens up your imagination because there's no dialogue, there's no subtitles, there's nothing really to kind of give any sort of hint of what the actual story is. Again, that's with the first time that you're actually playing the game, and we'll get to some of the other stuff later on. But as it stands, if you just play the game as is and see exactly what the game's trying to present to you, I feel like it completely falls apart. Honestly, I felt like it was trying to bite off more than it can chew, and it completely forgot how to become a video game in the process. So that being said, despite the story being what it is, what about the gameplay itself? The Quiet Man is all about fighting. At least it is when you finally get to control Dane when the game allows you to. Most of the time, you're watching cutscenes with real-life actors playing the roles of the characters, when suddenly, the game will transition into gameplay. It tries to pass this off as seamless and that you're seeing a fantastic blend between real-life and video game graphics, but trust me, this is anything but that. As you could probably tell from the footage, The Quiet Man doesn't look visually good. As a matter of fact, it looks very terrible in some spots. Colors could get washed out, objects could get in the way, and the camera could get stuck in some corners, and so much more can go wrong. What's worse is how stiff and unresponsive the controls can be in combat. Dane can fight with fierce kung fu-like attacks and dodge enemies for these pretty brutal counterattacks, but good luck trying to get everything to work properly when you want it to, since the mechanics are so inconsistent and probably broken. There are some environmental attacks that you can do, but I never really saw them throughout my entire time playing The Quiet Man. I just couldn't get them to work, let alone set up enemies for these types of attacks. Let's not forget how every enemy looks nearly identical to each other, almost like the team copy and pasted them in each combat section. Other than this, you don't really do anything else in The Quiet Man, making the whole game feel super repetitive and monotonous.
And did I mention, the first time around you have to play all of this without sound? Yeah, I'm serious. The game sounds like you're listening to an empty shell for over 2 hours. I get the whole artistic vision thing, but do they really need to do this for the entire game? It really didn't help and made things a whole lot worse.
Now, if I'm going to be totally honest here, The Quiet Man looks like a visual mess outside of the cutscenes that are done with real actors. The gameplay itself when you're fighting different enemies looks like it was pulled out of the early PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 2 era graphics, and just everything looks so muddied and diffused, and the glare effects get all in the way and all this different type of stuff. On top of that, there is a bunch of bugs and glitches that completely mess up the entire gameplay experience. There was quite a few times I was fighting a whole group of enemies and I had to deal with all these different types of like counterattacks and stuff that you're allowed to do, but for whatever reason the mechanics and the controls of the game just are completely out of whack, and it felt like they weren't tested enough that nothing really worked in a way that it was intended to work. I would try to go for a counterattack and do one of these like cool takedown moves, but every time I would try to do the actual evade button and actually try to dodge and stuff, nothing would actually go the way it was supposed to, and I would end up just either getting hit or just smacking the enemy with like a weak punch that really didn't do anything in the course of the fight. One of the other things that really bugged me about The Quiet Man's gameplay is that there's no real tutorial level. There's a menu that actually shows these little kind of like LED light screens or LCD light screens that gives you an inclination of like how you're supposed to control the game. But again, there's no real tutorial to show you exactly how certain things are supposed to work, or even give you something to read and actually figure out and show you examples of how you're actually supposed to fight throughout these gameplay sections. And that's another problem with The Quiet Man. It just feels like you just watch a cutscene, you get into a little feud, you watch another cutscene, you get into another little feud with a bunch of enemies that are duplicated, you watch another cutscene, and the cycle repeats itself throughout the entirety of the game. The other problem too that I found with some of the battles in The Quiet Man is that some of the characters felt like they're way overpowered and they're just completely out of whack with their AI and their programming. Some of the bad guys and the boss fights that you get into, including this guy that wears this crow mask that he's supposed to be a real big baddie throughout the story, just feel out of whack, and they're just so poorly programmed. Their AI is so messed up, and it felt like every time I tried to go do an attack or even try to like block or dodge some of the attacks that he was throwing at me, he would just completely just go right through them and damage me, even though I was evading some of his attacks. What's more, when you get hit by enemy attacks, the entire screen gets completely out of whack. You get all these glare effects, things start to change color, and sometimes you start to see these flashes of some of the cutscenes that like superimpose themselves on the gameplay, completely obscuring your view from what's going on screen. I really disliked it. I wish that things were kind of, planned out or organized a little bit better. I don't mind some of the superimposed cutscenes in certain sections, especially if it's used very sparingly, but the way that they actually did it throughout the story of The Quiet Man, especially in some of the later stages, completely messed things up for me, completely made it not fun, and it was just a complete mess overall. That's the best way I could describe it. It's just a complete mess. There was a few sections right at the end of the story when I was actually fighting the final boss fight, and I would get stuck in objects, or Dane would actually get caught in certain areas. There were like these invisible walls, and I couldn't move, but I also couldn't attack the enemy, so I was locked in place, and I had to completely restart the game in order to continue moving forward. Stuff like that really sucks, and it almost comes off as like the team didn't really beta test this game as much as they probably should have. And even despite all those problems that I had with The Quiet Man's gameplay, my biggest issue comes from the extra content and update that happened after the game's initial release.
The extra update that came out after the game's release is known as The Quiet Man Answered. This patch not only adds sound and dialogue to the entire game, but also adds subtitles and a few more tweaks that give more context to the main plot. Why anyone would think this is okay for a game to get after its release is beyond me, but does it change much to the experience? Yeah, it honestly does, but not really for the better. There is sound finally, and you can understand exactly what goes on in cutscenes. However, the plot is still confusing and shallow, the controls and gameplay are still buggy and probably broken, and you're not really getting anything brand new content-wise with this update. What's more, you have to fully complete the game a second time to see everything with sound. You can't skip cutscenes or select the chapter in which you want to start with. Mind you, nothing new really changes with the menus, and you don't get a real tutorial other than what's already there in the menus before the update. Everything about this feels lazy, and I feel bad for all the actors and actresses that were part of the game. Their work wasn't fully experienced until after the game's release and only through a patch. It's all very disappointing and makes for probably the worst game I've played in a while.
Here's the crazy thing about the Quiet Man Answered content that came after the game's initial release. Had the game came out and was presented just like this without any of the type of like artistic stuff that they were trying to do, I myself, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other people, would have received the Quiet Man a whole lot better. But as it stands now, it comes off more as an excuse to fix a lot of the game's problems, as well as also address all the concerns that people had about the Quiet Man. Myself and many other people just didn't get it, and just didn't get the direction that Square Enix was trying to go with the Quiet Man, and again, it just completely falls apart no matter how you look at it. But the thing that got to me the most and really pissed me off when I was playing this game for review was when I was finally going to complete The Quiet Man Answered. It was my second playthrough of the game, and right when I finished the game, right when I completed the final boss fight, and right at the end of the final cutscene, right before the credits when you're supposed to get pinged for the trophy for doing so, the game completely crashed on me and black screened, and I was locked in just looking on this black screen completely with nothing else to do. I was like, you know what? I'm done. I am not dealing with this anymore. I am not playing through this game a second time. The experience and the journey to get there was just not worth actually just trying to get one trophy just because Square Enix decided to release a game or at least release content for the game that was a little bit much more in tune for actually having people enjoy it. Again, I have nothing against being artistic and actually trying to show us something that's unique and different from a different perspective, or present us, games in a different type of light. There are plenty of games out there that do that. Again, Hellblade, Life is Strange, and many other games out there. Journey. I can think of so many other games that do this right and actually do it in a way that's interesting, intriguing, and really provides a whole lot of value for gamers out there. But for The Quiet Man, I am supremely disappointed. I am supremely, annoyed, and just feel like everything that Square Enix was trying to do with this game completely fell apart, and it's something that is definitely not worth anybody's time. So as you can tell right now, I am not a fan of The Quiet Man. I think it's one of the worst games of 2018. It is something that could have been really awesome. Again, I thought that this was going to be a little bit more in lines or very much in tune with something like The Bouncer. But what we ended up with is something that is a complete and utter failure on all fronts. I'm pretty sure that they're going to offer this on PlayStation Plus as a free game at some point, but I don't even think it's worth playing through that at that point. The game is very short. It's about 2.5 hours, and at the same time you could watch a movie or at least a full-length feature film. But even then, I feel like you'll get a better experience overall rather than playing The Quiet Man. And there you go, guys. That's my thoughts on The Quiet Man. Probably one of the worst games I've played of 2018. Let me know what's up in the comment section down below. Tell me your guys' thoughts about The Quiet Man or any other type of off-brand Square Enix games that isn't Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest, or any of the other typical stuff that we would normally associate with them. Put it in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to leave me a like on this video review and also subscribe to my YouTube channel when you guys can. I appreciate all the support that all of you have been giving me. I have a lot more great content that I'm pretty sure you guys are really going to enjoy, and it's all coming very, very soon. And also, let me give a big shout out to Jasmine Russell for supporting me at the Beast tier level on my Patreon page. You're getting shout outs for the entire month on every single video. If you guys want that same type of love, again, check the description box down below. I am on Patreon. Support my content on Patreon. Even at the $1 level, you guys get a whole bunch of cool exclusives and perks, as well as also other different types of tier levels that offer you a whole slew of exclusive content, cool love like what I just did right now, and a whole bunch of other things that you guys should definitely check out. With that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. I will talk to all of you again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.
Thanks a ton, everyone, for watching this video review. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me lately. Don't forget, I am streaming nearly every day over on Twitch TV. There'll be links in the description box below. Hopefully I get to see you guys in the chat sometime. And also, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos just like this one. I'll put a couple other reviews and other cool content that I know you guys will enjoy here on the side. I will talk to all of you again very soon. Peace out, and stay epic, everybody.